Okay, let's start with the integration between 1C enterprise and some third-party system. So this is what I'm going to show you. Let me talk about the problem definition here. Let's say you want to have a web e-commerce site that sells something that you want to sell. So basically, its functionality is included into 1C Drive, for example, or many other 1C applications. Theoretically, you could use the 1C Drive application or anything else just to publish it to the internet, open it for your customers so they could make orders, do payments, and stuff like that. So you can build e-commerce application using 1C Enterprise only, but there will be one downside, and it is that you cannot change the UI as much as you'd like to. So you will have standard 1C Enterprise interface that you all very familiar with, and it's fine. It works great and it's responsive, looks like that, but it's not what internet users get used to, right? So they got used to something more special, something more unique, and something built with the native web technologies. So that might be a problem. And the solution for this problem is to have this application, this 1C enterprise application on the back end, and to build the front end, like separate front end for this application using e-commerce platform. And in our case, we will be using WordPress, and we will be using WooCommerce plugin for the WordPress that does exactly this. So it's basically a plugin that allows you to build e-commerce site on top of the WordPress. So this is the admin side of this application that you can see right now. And actually, I can run the front end, or we'll be looking at something like that. And if we go this way, we will need to implement bi-directional data exchange between your backend 1C Enterprise application and your front-end WooCommerce application. So why bi-directional? We need data flow back and forth between these two entities, between WooCommerce and 1C Enterprise application. But why? It would be much easier if we had all the data on one side, for example, inside of the 1C Enterprise, and we would use the web application only to show those data. But this is not exactly the easiest way. And the problem is that some data will come from the website, from the front-end side of this distributed system. For example, information about what products are added to the cart, all right? Information about users. So users will be registering on the front end. Users will be selecting things on the front end. Users will be making payments in the front end. So all this data will originate on the front end, and they need somehow to get into the back end, into the 1C Enterprise. Theoretically, we could add some web services to 1C Enterprise. So this data flow would be synchronous. So you have web interface, but any data that are created on the website will be put into the 1C Enterprise immediately. So this is one way of doing that. But for example, 1C Drive does not have this functionality, and it's not necessarily the best way of doing that. Or we can create data on both sides. Some data will be created on the backend, some data will be created on front end, and then we will just send them to other side, so this side also have them. And this is what I'm going to show you today. So let's see how it works, and let's see what are the steps of this process. And let me tell you one thing. When it comes to distributed systems, you don't want to make too big steps, okay? You want to make very small steps, one very small step at a time, and check it each step of the way, so you don't miss any error, anything that is not working the way it's supposed to. Because you can build the pipeline, for example, back end to the front end, or in the opposite direction, and then it won't work, and you will have zero ideas about where it broken. Okay, so there are too many moving parts, and the communication can be broken in many different places. So please go ahead very slowly, checking every small thing on your way. And okay, let me first delete those products, and let me start with the communication from 1C Enterprise to WooCommerce. You probably will want this direction of data flow for all your products or all your prices, stuff like that. So you will create your products on the back end. You will set up the prices for those products, and you want this data to go to WooCommerce, and so users can see it on the front end side. And this is what we will start from. So first of all, any solution of this kind, any solution that is open for sending some data to it, has few levels of protection, of security, okay? And the first security feature is, of course, a username and a password. So you cannot just go to the API that is published by by WooCommerce or by any other tool anonymously and ask it to do something. This is too dangerous. Everybody will be misusing it. So nobody does it like that. You always have the first layer of protection in the form of username and password. So this is the first thing, but this is not the only thing. And if we go here to settings and advanced, we will see the REST API link. So this is exactly what we need. I don't know how familiar you are with the REST API and this kind of stuff. So I will give you an idea, and I will give you resources to look into later if the idea wasn't enough. So basically, what the REST API is, it's just HTTP service that is published outside and provides the internet with access to the data living inside of this application, inside of this WooCommerce plugin. And it does not accept anybody who knows a login and password. So you need to know that, but this is not enough. You also need to register your application here. And you do that by adding a key. So you add a key, you describe it, I don't know, my new application. You specify your username. You require specific level of permissions of access, read-write in our case, and then you click generate API keys. And what happens is WooCommerce generates these two keys that does not make any sense. It's just a sequence of symbols, and it remembers those keys hashes in connection with your account. So it knows that whoever uses this login and password should also know these two secret keys. And any API requests will require those keys present. So you will need to save them somewhere and use them for every request you send to the site. So I'm revoking these keys, and I just have already generated keys for my application. So this is the second layer of protection, what we also need. And the next thing we need is to understand what is inside of this REST API, what endpoints, what methods are provided by this API. And this is more or less standard because REST uses the standard HTTP methods. So it's more or less the same for different sites, but there might be minor differences in how it is implemented. So you will need some kind of manual, some kind of documentation. And when it comes to WooCommerce, this is the documentation that you will need. I will post it to the chat. And here, for example, you can see that to get the list of all products living inside of the WooCommerce, you will need to use these requests. Okay, and let me say a few words about HTTP requests and this get stuff. And the language that is used for these requests, it's just a standard HTTP protocol. Okay, so this is the only thing that we will be using, and it's actually the same protocol as you know that your browser uses to work with websites. So you all know that this protocol has the URL, right? So the address of the resource you want to access, but it has more than that. So usually this is the only thing that people know about the HTTP protocol, but it has a little bit more than that. And the next important part that it supports are request methods. So actually, when you specify a URL, you also can specify the method. And for example, when I refresh this page, what my browser does, it sends GET request to this address. And the Wikipedia site gets this request, renders this page in form of HTML, and sends it in response for my request. Okay, but GET is not the only method, and actually HTTP protocol supports a bunch of other methods. Most important of them are POST, delete, and probably PUT. So basically, you can specify any URL and send POST request to this URL. And if this website supports these POST requests, it will mean to decide that you want to create something new. You want to add some data. For example, when you work with Facebook or Telegram and you post some message, right? This is the POST request that will be sent to the Telegram application or to the Facebook site or to whatever you're working with. So POST means basically add. So you want to add new information. Delete means that you want to delete some piece of information. For example, you want to unsend the message that you just sent, and this will be a delete request. And PUT basically means update. So when you send the message, but then you noticed some mistake that you made, you want to change it, and this will be the PUT request. And another interesting part of the HTTP request is actually the body. So you can have the URL, you can have your method, but you also can have a body, like some really big text that is attached. It's like email attachments, okay? So some really big text that attached to your request. And you can send, for example, when you create new data and you send POST request, you usually use request body to specify the fields, the attributes for the for the object that you're creating. And of course, this body and everything else about the HTTP protocol can be only text. Right, so it's a text protocol which is explicitly specified in its name. It's hypertext transfer protocol. So no binaries, no live streams, nothing like that. Only texts. You can send binaries, but you need to convert them into text first. It can be done using base 64 conversion algorithm, conversion method, or other ways. But the only thing that you can send or receive using HTTP protocol is text. So now we understand better what this means, right? So we just send this GET request, and it should return us the list of all products we have on the site. Or we can send this POST request, and it should allow us to add a new product to the site. And here you can see all the fields that is supported by this endpoint, by the product endpoint. So these are all the fields basically that live in the catalog, in the products catalog of the WooCommerce plugin. Okay, now let's try to use those APIs. Let's start with the GET request. So as you can see, it has the end part of the URL, but it does not have the first part of the URL. And this will be the name of our site. So this is the first part, and this is the rest of the URL. And to send it, I won't be using Once Enterprise because I don't want two complex moving parts working together at this stage. I want something very simple, very basic. And the tool I prefer is called Insomnia, and basically it's an API checking and testing tool. So you can send any kind of HTTP requests using this tool. And this is exactly what I will be doing just to check how it works. This is where I specify the URL. And again, this is the DNS name of my site. And this end part is taken from here. Let's list all products. List all products is taken from here. Okay. Method I use is GET. As you can see, there are other methods here. And now to those two secret keys that I received when registering my application in WooCommerce. I need to send them in this form. So I need to send them as query parameters. This is the only way WooCommerce supports it. And there are alternatives, but WooCommerce does not support them. So this is the only way. And basically what Insomnia does for me is I just specify the parameter name and its value, and Insomnia adds it to the request as a parameters. But I can do the same right here if I want to. So it will be absolutely the same result. So let's check. I'm sending the request and I'm getting the response code 200, which means that everything's fine. And these are products that I have. So what the hell does this mean? Okay, so what this format is. This thing is called JSON. And again, there are many alternatives that can be used. For example, XML can be used to return data, but JSON is used most often. And the reason for that is that it's native for JavaScript. So you can read it using JavaScript without any problems. Basically, this is what you use in JavaScript anyway. So this is why it's so popular. And again, so you can see what it looks like. It's human readable. So you can read it with your eyes. It's not very pleasant reading, but it's doable if you want to. But of course, the main purpose of this format is for your application to read it. Okay, so this is what WooCommerce Return does. What else? Let's see what else it supports. It also supports retrieve a product. So retrieve a specific product by its ID. So we see here, if you go here to products, we will see that each product has its ID, its unique number that we can use to retrieve this specific product. For example, ID 32. Let's try get specific product by its ID. Here you go, ID 32. Send, and this is our Coke, right? This is our Coca-Cola. So this is how we grab data from the WooCommerce. Now we made sure it works, and now let's add another moving part to the picture, and let's do the same request from OneC Enterprise. Okay, and this is what I will be using. So as you can see, it's OneC Drive application, and the way I implemented it is I added an extension. There is no real integration between this extension and the OneC Drive like core functionality. So you can use the same extension in your projects with for different applications. Basically, there is almost no connection between OneC Drive and this extension, with the exception of the services subsystem that is taken from the Drive subsystems list. So there is a services subsystem. And I did that so I can show this extension interface inside of the Drive application interface. And here is the only thing that works here is this data processor. So you can look into its code and see how it's working. And what I will do, I will save this extension and separately save this data processor to my Google Drive, and I will share the link with you so you can use it in your projects if you want. And again, this is not the real integration with OneC Drive. This is just an example that shows how to send requests, how to get response, how to process the result, this kind of stuff. So this is a very simple example. I have read product button and read product comment, and I have add product button and comment, which we will look into later. Let's start with the read product. So this is how we do that using OneC Enterprise. First of all, we need to set a connection between OneC Enterprise and the WooCommerce and the site that is published using the WooCommerce. This is how it's done. Pretty easy. I'm just telling OneC Enterprise the address, the DNS name of the site I'm trying to talk to. This is the port number, which is the HTTPS port, right? And I also ask OneC Enterprise to create a new SSL connection to send data over HTTPS protocol. Basically, this is it. And this is an important part because this extension won't be able to establish connections with anything outside of the application without this line of code. So you will need it if you use extensions. And please don't forget that, otherwise you'll get that your extension performs an unsecure, unsafe operation or something like that. Okay, so this is it. I create HTTP connection, return it to the caller, and now it lives here. And next thing I do is I create HTTP request, which is again just OneC Enterprise class that I use. And as you can see, I use only the second part of the address. So this one, the one that was specified here. So I use only this because the first part lives here in the connection. And this is the specific endpoint inside of the connection that I want to address. And then I just reproduce this string here. Okay, so this request, I just combine together the endpoint address, the product ID. Okay, so this will be not this request. Yes, this will be this request. So the product ID, which lives here, and then I add the consumer key and consumer secret, these two secret things that were given to me by WooCommerce site. This is it. And then I use HTTP connection to send this request with the GET method. This is how it works. And I will receive response here from the HTTP response object. And then I just unpack this response and I will show what's inside of it. And the way I unpack this data is this. So the site will return me JSON, this guy right here, and I can show it directly, or I can process it first, basically parse the JSON, find all the names and all the attribute names and all the values, and show it in more digestible form. And the way we do that in Once Enterprise is using JSON reader object. And what this object does is it basically just goes through the JSON file from the beginning to the end. So it's just streamlined processing it, and this is the way you work with it. So you read this JSON and you create reader, you send the response, the JSON inside of this reader, and then you said read this JSON and this is your response data. And this response data is a map, just once enterprise standard data structure. So you can just address all the attributes inside of this map like that. And let's see how it works. So I added my data processor here to the service subsystem. So this is where it lives. And now I can take any product, for example, this one, lace, ID 14. Click read, and this is what has been read from the WooCommerce. This is the entire map just shown here, and this is the name field that is shown here. So this is how it works. Pretty simple, right? Now let's move on to the writing part, how we create new products here. This is what we use the post method for, and the endpoint is products. But besides that, we will need to specify the content of this product, the name of it, the name of the product, maybe the category it belongs to, maybe, I don't know, the vendor, something else. So all the fields that are supported is listed here. So you can take it from here, but we will be using just some of them. And by some, I mean the only one, the name. So we will be using the name field only, but of course you can use other fields as well. So again, as always, as usual, let's check how it works using the Insomnia tool first, and then implement it using Once Enterprise. So this is our request. Now it's post, and it points to here, to products. It again contains consumer key and consumer secret, but it also contains the name parameter. And here I can write anything, my very new product. Okay, so now theoretically, when I send it, it should go to WooCommerce and create this product there. Let's check. So I click send, and I receive 201 response code, which again is a part of the HTTP protocol specification. And you can find all of the response codes here, and everything that lives inside of 200 range is okay. 200 means just okay. 201 means that new object was created, and so on. So these are all return codes that you can receive. So you'd better process the response when you send your requests, and I will show you how I do that. Another important detail is that this name that I specified now, in this case, sent just inside of the parameters, so inside of this URL string. This is not the only way, but this way will work as well. And we already received that the product is created. Let's check if this is true. And this is our product that we just created, and ID is 62, and here we can see 62 as well, and here we can see 62 as well. So this is the first way of doing that, of creating a new product. But of course, if I want to specify all these fields, this will be not very practical, because this kind of query, Insomnia will help me to do it this way. But when I will do that in Once Enterprise, it won't be very beautiful to look at. So there is another way. This way is to use a query body, right? So this attachment that I can send along with any query that I send. So this is what I did here. Again, consumer key and consumer secrets are passed as a parameters of the query. And the reason for that is because WooCommerce does not support any other ways. Other sites might support it, might support the keys inside of query body, but WooCommerce doesn't. So this is the way I do it. And here leaves the body. So you can select the format of your body. It can be plain text, can be XML, can be YAML, it can be JSON. And in our case, it has to be JSON because this is the only format WooCommerce supports. So I need to write JSON compliant body here. And this is what it looks like. Very simple, very easy to remember. Another new product, send it and see how it works. Okay, send, refresh. This is another new product. Okay, so we just added 2 new products to the WooCommerce. And now let's see how it should be implemented using Once Enterprise. So this will be the second command that lives on this form inside of this data processor, add product. And this is the way it looks. So this is how we add a product. Again, same deal here, create HTTP connection, nothing new. This part, I didn't check if it's necessary or not, just added it just in case, because this header tells the service that we are talking to what format the body of our request is in, right? So we send in a body and we need to tell the receiving API, what format we use to form this body. So this is how we do that. We add a header and we tell that the content type of our body is JSON. I'm not sure if it's necessary. Maybe WooCommerce will work without that. Maybe not. I didn't check. Other than that, all the same. Again, HTTP request to the product's endpoint with the consumer key and consumer secret, and with headers that we compiled here, that we created here. Okay, so now to the body. Now we need to create a body in the JSON format and attach it to the request. And this is how we do that. So now I use not the JSON reader, but JSON writer. And again, this is just a sequential processing of a file. So every time you add something, it just adds it to the end of the sequence, to the JSON text that you're creating. So very simple, very straightforward. So I set string. Basically, this is that part of the request. This is what will happen when you start writing object. Then we add property name and add the property value by taking it from the form attribute. Then we add end object, which will add this part here. And then we just close the JSON writer. And all this sequence will be returned by JSON writer. So we pick it up, we create this variable here, and now it contains the request body, and we send it this way. So we tell the request to set body from string, and we pass this JSON as a parameter for this method. So now our request has body that we just compiled together, and now we can send this request just like that. Very same, but a different method, post instead of get. And here is the thing that I mentioned about the return codes. So you want to process the response from the API, because you might do something wrong, and maybe you will try to create the product that already exists or something like that. There might be some errors on the API side, or API might don't like something that you do and wants to tell you that you're doing things wrong. So it will return you the status code somewhere in the range of 400 or 500, which is the error ranges. So you want to process the status code from the HTTP response object. And again, if it's in 200 range, it's okay, it's fine. If it's not, then you should tell the user that something went wrong and show response code and everything else. some message that comes with this response code. So, okay, very straightforward. Again, the same HTTP response will have some data returned, namely this JSON. So again, we unpack this JSON and show it in our data processor. So let's add yet one other new product to the picture. I'm sending the request. Everything looks fine. So I received the 201 response code, and let's check if our site has this new product here. And yes, it does. So we just did the same from the Once Enterprise. Okay, so this is one direction. Now we know how to send data from the Once Enterprise to WooCommerce site. What about the other direction? What if we want, and we do want users to register using this interface, right? Using the site, using the front end. And after that, we will need to know who those users are. So we need those data somehow sent to us. And of course, there are different ways of implementing that, but the most modern and the most progressive one is called Webhooks. And again, Wikipedia, and here you go. So you can read about Webhooks in details here, but the main idea of Webhook is that it's basically an event handler that traces the number of events happening on the remote site, in our case, inside of the WooCommerce plugin. And whenever this event happens, WooCommerce will send the request to the address that you specify. So you can subscribe your API to any event, to some specific set of events that happen inside of the remote server. I hope this idea is clear. Okay, there is a question about the request. What if the remote server does not respond? This is the distributed system territory. Okay, so anything can happen here, and you should expect every kind of trouble and issue that you can imagine, and then some, because everything will be working not the way it's supposed to. You will be losing internet connection, so the remote server will go down at some point, and you need to take all these casualties and all these cases into account when you create a distributed system. So this is something to think about all the time. And this is one of the cases. So you send the request and you did not get the response. What do you do next? And this is a great question. And the answer is you resend it. So basically what will happen is you will receive a timeout here. So let's say I'm sending this request and the remote server does not respond to it. It's just silence in response. So what will happen is I will get here with the error code timeout. I don't remember the number of the code, but again, you can Google it. So it's a specific response code. That means that the timeout occurred during the sending of your request. And basically, you can go two directions here. You can show this error to a user and make him responsible for decision what to do next. For example, a user can try to send the same request, to click the same button later, like tomorrow maybe, okay, or maybe in an hour, and see if it works this way. Or put this responsibility on user and just show him the error message. Or you can try to process this issue yourself using your code, which is more difficult. But when it comes to distributed systems, probably you should go this way, because this kind of issues will happen all the time, very regularly. And the way you do that is you need some kind of a queue. You need some kind of a message queue inside of your application. It can be information register, it can be a catalog. And when you send request, instead of sending it directly, you just put it into the queue. You just add it to this catalog, and then there is a background job that browses through these catalog records and sends all requests and process all responses. And if it sees that the response is timeout or some kind of other temporary problem that looks temporary, then it can just leave the request in the queue to send it again and again and again until it receives a good response, like 200 or 201, or until it reaches the limit that's set for this queue. So this is usually how you implement that kind of stuff. Okay, so we started talking about the webhooks, right? Again, to see how it works in WooCommerce, WooCommerce, we need to go to settings and advanced. If you work with any other solution, there will be its own webhook section somewhere. So you will need to refer to documentation, to the manual. But in case of WooCommerce, it lives here. So there is Webhooks link. And this is where we can create the subscription for the event that we want. And these are all the events that WooCommerce provides us with. Okay, for example, order is created, product is created, product updated, product restored, and so on and so forth. Or order created, right? Customer created, customer updated. So these are all the events that we can subscribe for. But let's stick with products and just check how it works. It will work the same way for all other events. I already have a subscription here. So let's just see what it looks like. So I subscribed for a product created event. And this is basically the only important part is the response, the delivery URL. So what will happen is whenever a new product is created, WooCommerce will send the request to this endpoint, which should be published on my site. And this is where I will receive something in JSON form that I will process and decipher and create a new product using this information. Basically, this is it. And now let's see how we implement this endpoint using Once Enterprise. So this is my extension, and this is where I add a new service, HTTP service in this case. And the difference with web services, I don't know if you're aware, but web services are SOAP services. Again, Wikipedia to the rescue. This is the SOAP that I wanted. So this is another type of protocol that occurred earlier than the REST APIs and was widely used and still is widely used, but it loses its popularity. And now everybody switches to HTTP protocols, to HTTP requests, but it still exists. You can still use it in Once Enterprise, and it lives at web services. It's a little bit more convenient when it comes to Once Enterprise because there are some tools like XDTO packages that maps your objects of your Once Enterprise objects into the subservice data structures. So it's a little bit easier to work with. But when it comes to talking to somebody else's APIs, it's usually HTTP requests, and it's usually the only thing that is supported webhooks. So to implement webhook, we will need HTTP service, and this is what we do. We specify the endpoint, and I called it product, and then we specify the method that is supported by this endpoint, and the only method I specified is post, and this is what's going on here. So when somebody sends a request to my endpoint, the request will end up here in this parameter, and then I just read the request, and that's it. I don't process the result. I don't put it into the product catalog or anything else. So I just catch it here, and I will show you that it works. And this is the only thing we will do. So there is no real integration with the OneDrive data structure. Then I publish it, okay, by using this simple interface. So these are my HTTP services, and I just click this publish extension HTTP services by default, and this way I will publish it. And again, after I publish it, first thing I want to do is to check if it works using something simple, using the same Insomnia tool, okay? So debug my own services using Insomnia as well. And this is the address that I use. So basically, this one is the name of my application in the web, and I believe I can just access it using this name. So this is the web interface for this application, and I have no rights for starting a client of this type. There is a very good reason for that. So there is a catch with webhooks. So when you send a request to somebody, you somehow need to authenticate yourself, and there are different ways of doing that. And the most simple one is using the username and a password, the same way that we did with when we send the request to WooCommerce. But again, it depends on what the remote site webhooks support. We don't know that. And in this case, in the case of WooCommerce, it's not much, let's say that. So the only possibility of authenticate myself is to add my username and my password somewhere here inside of the URL, which is not safe and which is not supported by Once see second. Okay, so to even start talking to your code, you already need to provide username and the password, and WooCommerce does not support that. Again, we use what we have. We cannot do anything about that. We cannot do much about that. So we need to protect it some other way. And the way we do that is we publish the web service separate from the, for example, web interface. So we publish web service on not standard port, and then this is our site. We know its IP address. We block everything going to this port except for this IP address, and this way we protect this communication. Other site will support different methods of protection, and usually it will be something like basic authentication, which is username and password, or maybe even something like OAuth. Again, this is the specification of this protocol. Very cool stuff, very interesting protocol, very safe, provides you with all safety you might want, but this plugin does not support it. So we use what we have, and we published our web service separately from all other publications, and we closed this port to everything but this site. I didn't do that, of course. I just published it separately. But if you're in real life and you're implementing the real solution, that's what you should do. Okay, and now to the rest of the URL. Again, this is 1C stuff, and this is very important, HS. So this is how you tell the 1C enterprise that you want to access HTTP services, HS. If it was a web service, this is what you would use. But we use HTTP service, so this is what we use. And after that, we specify the name of the service, which has to be the same as this name right here. So this is the name we should use. Okay, so this is the full address, no username, no password. And then again, in the request body, we send the JSON with some new product, and let's see if it works. So I don't have any interface here, so I just add the breakpoint here and tell the debugger to catch all HTTP requests, incoming HTTP requests. Now I send this request. This is my code working. So let's see what's inside of it. Receives other requests. Okay, so what we did here is we get the body from the request. Okay, so we just read the attachment that this request contained. We used again JSON reader to process this JSON, and the readJSON method just converted it into the map for us. And let's see what's inside of this map. As you can see, the only records inside of this map is name and this product name that I sent. So this worked just fine, as you can see. And now let's check how it works when we do something in WooCommerce. So I'm going to products, and let's just duplicate this one, WooCommerce products. Okay. And now I click publish, go here, and wait, because WooCommerce does exactly what I said what I just said. It creates a queue for all our outcoming requests, and then it sends them in a cycle. So we can see that this product is already inside of the WooCommerce data, but we still, we received these data just now. So there is some delay because of this queue, and because this is how it's supposed to be. And here you go. This is the map of all the fields that were sent by WooCommerce, and this is the name of the product. So yeah, this is it. This is our bidirectional exchange between the 1C enterprise and WooCommerce plugin. And yeah, this is all I wanted to tell you. And thank you so much.